Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Cambridgeshire County Council's Constitution Ethics Committee. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. But can I ask that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today. If the alarm sounds at any other point, I will adjourn the meeting and we will make our way downstairs out of the main entrance and turn left. The muster point is at the far end of the building. So item 1 is apologies for absence and declarations of interest.
Apologies are received by Councillor Martin, Councillor Nessinger and Councillor Porton is due to substitute, Councillor Howett, who is substituted by Councillor Bula.
Thank you very much. And does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? I see no hands, so we'll move on to item 2, which is minutes of our last meeting, which was held on the 26th of June. We're being asked to approve those minutes. Can I ask if any member disagrees with the accuracy at all? No, so I see no objections, so I will sign those minutes as approved. Item 2 are the proposed changes to the Constitution. Michelle Rowe, who's our Democratic Services Manager, will present the report. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Setting in the context for this report, members will remember that we established a Constitution working group, which has met a few times to consider changes to the Constitution first before recommending them on to this committee for further consideration. And this is what's happened with the issues set out in this report. I'm going to take them in groups so that it allows questions after each section, because there's a lot of different proposals set out in there. So if we start with public questions and the petition scheme, we are, following the meeting of the Constitution Working Group, we are proposing a number of changes. And one is aligning public questions for council and committee meetings in relation to when they need to be submitted, and also in relation to the time allowed for someone to ask their question. So the big difference will be that if you ask a question at council, you will now have 3 minutes to ask your question rather than 2 minutes, which brings you in line with the committee process. We're also planning to remove the supplementary question available at council. That provision is not available at committees. And by doing that, that allows the 3 minutes allows people to have more detail in their original question, and also then frees up some time for us to increase the number of questions that we can actually receive at council. At the moment, that's just 4, which is quite limited unless the chair exercises his discretion. So we're proposing that if we make the first change, that will give us more time to increase the number of questions to 6. We're also planning to allow questions at extraordinary and special meetings. At the moment, that provision doesn't exist, but I think it's important when you get a particular item that attracts a lot of public interest. So the question would just relate to that item at a special meeting or extraordinary meeting. If it was on any other subject, then it would need to go to the next council meeting. And we are clarifying in relation to asking questions. We do this at the moment with the chair's discretion to allow people to ask their question electronically. I think that has been welcomed by a lot of public questioners who are unable to actually get to this venue. In relation to petitions, we are clarifying that we will not accept petitions which are outside the remit of this council or our capacity to influence. I think that's important. We are removing the requirement for petitions to be signed primarily by local people. We get we get a considerable number of petitions signed by an awful lot of people. Many are local, but lots aren't. But many of the ones that aren't local do have a link to the subject matter. The only difference is that in relation to presenting the petition at a council or committee meeting, we would still require 50 local signatures. I must admit, it does help as regards the Democratic Services team, because if you get a 3,000 signature petition, at least we don't have to go counting all the signatures, just the first 50, in order for someone to speak. We're clarifying the way that petitions can be responded to, and we're also asking the petitioner to make clear whether they wish to actually present a petition to a public meeting. The provision for a 15-minute debate for a petition over 3,000 signatures, it's proposed to move that. We have had petitions over 3,000. Generally, they relate to an item that's on the council agenda anyway, so we wouldn't enact that provision. We would include that as part of the debate. I think the trouble with this provision is that you're talking about a 15-minute debate, basically allows 3 members to speak, because 5 minutes each. So it is really quite superficial in that sense. It doesn't allow a detailed debate, and there's ways of dealing with those petitions differently, so that we wouldn't necessarily ignore it. We would use the provisions within the Constitution to manage that, and it could be considered. But actually having a 15-minute debate on a petition where you haven't actually got a report or any background information at all is probably not particularly helpful. And we've just clarified some of the exclusion sections, just tidied things up there. So, Chair, I'm happy to accept any questions in relation to that section.
Thank you, Michelle. Any questions from members at all? Simon, let's start with you.
Michelle, and thank you for everybody who's been. I know a lot of work's been put into this. It's quite ironic that with local government review down the road, it seems a bit, senseless sometimes doing this sort of stuff when it's, not going to be here in 3 years' time potentially. Anyway, I digress. The only issue I've got, I'm absolutely comfortable with the whole recommendations, suggestions. It's my only concern is about taking the supplementary question out. Really, I think the process that we have at the moment is well formulated in the fact that you can ask. What I'm getting at is that it's quite a sterile environment. So people submit their question, the portfolio holder gets the facts right so they can respond to it. But I just think by taking out the supplementary question, we're losing that natural ability for someone to just ask a question that sort of gets drawn out in that discussion, really. And I think I'm just a bit worried that we're losing that democratic type voice for the public, really.
I hear what you say. I think the response I would say in relation to that is that when we receive a question, we are able to check that the question, obviously there is rules set out in the council's constitution, quite clear rules about what can be asked. So you can't ask anything, obviously, that's libelous or anything like that. That type of thing. So when we get the written question, we can check that. We can consult the monitoring officer, obviously, if we need to, if it's a particularly difficult question. In relation to the supplementary, there's no provision to do that because we just don't know what's going to be asked. And sometimes we find that it doesn't always relate to the original question that has been asked, which if we had received that supplementary question in advance, it wouldn't have met the requirements set out in the Constitution. And I think that is the difficulty that we have with the supplementary. The proposal to increase the time limit to 3 minutes will hopefully give the public questioner more time to ask everything in relation to their original question.
It answers my question. Whether I agree with it or not is a different matter.
That's fine. Thank you. We'll go to Lawrence and then Alex.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Michelle, for the presentation so far. I just wanted to pick up first and foremost page 14 of our packs and the track changes to the Constitution. Just worth highlighting that at 3.2, it still refers to 4 members of the public applying to speak. If that could be changed to 6 for when it goes to council, that would be lovely. And then the other thing for me is I find myself having a lot of sympathy for what Councillor Bywater's saying. Supplementary questions are a valuable part of our democratic process, giving, you know, the more forum we can give our residents to speak, the better. I have to say I was very hesitant about seeing the proposal to remove them. I think the question for me is what's the balance with the fact that actually we're allowing 2 more speakers with an additional minute, and also I think Michelle's comments are very useful. At the end of the day, if we get a supplementary question, we are not as well positioned to answer it robustly and effectively in the moment. Then I go to, well, can we continue to do written responses? I'm not entirely sure. I'm interested to see what the rest of the committee has to say about the removal of supplementary questions. But yeah, I think there is a balance. Overall, these changes are great, really positive, and just thickening our opportunities for democratic engagement from our residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Alex and then Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chair, and to everyone who was involved in working through all those details changes. I think most of them are really positive, and I really welcome the increase to 6 members of the public. I do wonder, though, in how many meetings did we get more than 4, for example, and what can we do to encourage public participation more generally, because I feel some meetings are really busy with public questions, especially the March meetings leading up to election times, where some other meetings are quieter. And if we're going to increase to 6, I would like to see perhaps more efforts to encourage members of the public to ask questions on a variety of topics, because often what happens when you have a lot of questions is many of them are on the same topic, either because there's a highly controversial issue on the agenda, or because you have sometimes people who are candidates asking questions in the March meeting. And I would like to encourage people who are not in those categories, just ordinary residents, to ask those questions and get their views across. I do have to say that, like, on the supplementary, I was in 2 minds about this, because from the perspective of a member of the public, and before I was on the council, I used to ask public questions in other councils. And I think from a member of the public perspective, it can be quite frustrating if you submit something and then the answer you get, you make all your way to the council, and then you get an answer which is often read from a script, and then you don't have the ability to follow up. Or if you feel your question wasn't answered, you don't have that ability to get back and say, actually, this didn't answer my question, can I follow up? And I do appreciate the arguments that sometimes the follow-ups might be out of order sometimes, and sometimes are not on the topic. But I wonder if that's not more of the role of, the chair. If something is out of order, you could always adjourn the meeting for a bit for, if you need advice. I appreciate sometimes it's an uncomfortable situation, but I think for democratic process, it's useful for the member of the public to have a chance to say, actually, didn't answer my question, or I feel I want a clarification on a certain issue. But other than that, I'm happy with all the changes proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wells?
Thank you. I was going to have the same query, page 14, 3.2, that has already been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Dupre?
Thank you. In general, I'm happy with the idea of having more questions, more questioners at full council meetings. I think that's a positive thing. I know there is a mix of views about the idea of not allowing supplementary questions. My personal view tends to be that if you want to ask a question, ask the question you want to ask first time round. But I'm aware that others have different views. Our role here is to make recommendations to the council. And it seems to me that if we rule that out at this meeting, council doesn't have a say. I think it is worth putting this to council to enable the decision to be made by council, so that there can be a debate on it, which there won't be if we rule it out at this point. I'm inclined for both of those reasons, personal support, but also allowing council to have the final say to suggest that it goes through.
Thank you. David.
Thank you. Got to remember which button to press on this now. Thank you, Chair. I too am rather sorry to see the supplementary question go, actually, because very often it's the supplementary question that really gets to the point. In a way, it's the real question the person wanted to ask. That you get over the bar, you get the first official question bar, and then you ask the real supplementary question. It's rather good. I'm in favour of keeping it myself. Thank you.
Thank you. I think just to summarise, my personal view is I think this does need to be debated at full council, and I think if the standard of debate at council is as good as it's been here just now, I think it will be excellent. Actually, I get the point about my concern when I first read this was taking away supplementary questions. Is that a good thing? I think the difficulty is sometimes people, as Michelle's pointed out, ask a supplementary question which isn't actually in order. It's not within our remit. But we don't want to discourage people from coming here because I think it's actually very good when they do that generally. It gets political, of course it does, but I think actually it functions generally pretty well and it does encourage some robust debate. Sophie, I wonder if you just advised, do we need to vote on the recommendation, this particular recommendation now, or take on block at the end? What's the best way? What we'll do is we'll go through the rest of the report. So don't feel that any of your sort of views won't be taken into account. And of course they will be. So, oh, sorry, Lawrence, to apologise. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. It seems like there is concern about removing the supplementary question. I wonder, is there, to officer colleagues, is there any world where we could end up in a situation where standard procedure is we don't, but we leave some sort of option for a chair to open up? Or is that even more difficult?
So that option exists at the moment. The chair has discretion. The difficulty you have is that if you have someone that asks a number of questions to different committees and you have the chair of one committee exercising their discretion to allow that person to speak, they then come to another committee and the chair of that committee doesn't. It is very confusing for that member of the public to understand why they're not being allowed to ask a supplementary question. And I think the difficulty is with the supplementary question is at council is that on the odd occasion, and this is the management of it, is that somebody wants to ask a particular question which they know will not get by the rules set out in the Constitution. So they ask another question that is more relaxed and then use that supplementary in order to ask the question that would never have been allowed based on the rules in our Constitution. And that's very difficult to manage. Yes, you can adjourn the council meeting and everything, but we do stream our meetings. If we're trying to encourage public engagement, having a meeting streamed where we're doing everything to stop public engagement because it's not meeting the rules in our Constitution is not a particularly good look in the sense to encourage public participation.
Thank you. Emma Duncan has just asked to speak, our monitoring officer.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of points really for members to sort of take into account in relation to this. I think Michelle's being very polite. We do frequently get questions which are ruled out of order for a number of reasons, quite often because they're defamatory or offensive. As a monitoring officer, and I imagine members will appreciate this as well, when you're in the chair, it's a bit too late once it's left that person's mouth. It's out there, it's recorded. And the offence has occurred. And so we like to be able to manage that in advance. Councillor Dupre made the point at the working group is that members of the public absolutely have a right to ask questions, and that is really, really important. But ask the question that you want to ask. And during that 3 minutes, members of the public will also have a right, it's not just about coming and asking a question, it's about setting out your point of view and coming to a question or indeed a series of questions at the end. We don't say, well, you've had one question, that's it. You can ask a series of questions related to that topic. But as a monitoring officer and the person who has to make the difficult decisions along with Michelle on this, it is really quite difficult when we see questions come in. We know that they breach the rules. rules in ways which I wouldn't want members, members of this council or members of the public to be exposed to in some of the ways that the questions are asked. And we want to protect the council against that. That's not appropriate. That's not why we have the questions in place. What we want to do is encourage good statements, good questions, people getting the answers that they've come for. And that's the really important thing about that. And also the expansion of the question time as well. I think that if we give more people an opportunity to come, and we do have quite a number of questions, quite often we exceed the limit and the chair uses their discretion to allow that. It would be good to encourage more people to do that. But my view as the monitoring officer is if you've got a question to ask, absolutely ask the question you want to ask. We can help you put it in a way that doesn't offend rules. We're quite good at doing that to help members of the public do that. But for us, in terms of managing the meeting, helping the chair manage the meeting, we want to protect, make sure that we're not doing anything which does cause offence to not only members but members of the public, and does put the council in a difficult position sometimes. So whilst I totally appreciate what members are saying, I do think that if you have any doubt about this, I think taking it forward to council, allowing a wider debate on it would be really helpful, and allow members to have a view on it and decide what they want to decide.
Thank you, Councillor Bywater.
I don't know if we're debating this or asking questions really, but my fear is we're using a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut here, because I've been on this council, 13 years now, and I don't think we've ever been in the full council chamber where we've had a problem with a supplementary question. They're probably just basic add-ons or just clarification for points but the filter system to get the original questions in is there. But I just fear that we're ultimately stifling an opportunity really. And I see people smirking, but that's my view.
I suspect there are probably times when people have taken maybe a different view when somebody's put a supplementary, but I think that is part of the issue, isn't it? We all react differently to a question. So I have Councillor Dupre, I think Michelle wants to come in here, and later, and Councillor Bulat.
Yeah, just to say I have actually been in a district council meeting at which checks were not done on public questions, and the result was a stream of highly defamatory questions targeted at a particular individual. It did the council concerned absolutely no credit whatsoever. It was an awful experience to be in the same room as. I stayed behind after the meeting to make sure that my colleagues were safe actually leaving the building after that. And that is not the kind of atmosphere that I would want to see here. We have had, as long as I can remember, we have had courtesy, good manners, orderly debate, decent questioning. And I would not want to see the green light given to behaviour that could look like that. I think that would be very, very sad. And as has been pointed out, you don't have the checks on supplementary questions that you do have on pre-submitted questions, and it is very much up to the chair of the meeting in the heat of the moment to try to wrangle what might be a quite difficult situation.
Thank you. We'll go to Michelle and then Councillor Bulat.
Thanking Councillor Bywater for his comments. We did have one instance where we did have that particular problem, which involved the chair having to intervene quite strongly, and it did cause the public questioner concern some considerable distress. So I think I note your comments about sledgehammer to crack a nut, but we have had one instance, and maybe I don't challenge that comment, but there has been one instance, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bulat.
Thank you. I think it's a question about the balance, because I've seen examples in many councils of questions supplementaries being out of order and chair having to intervene or meeting being adjourned and so on. But the majority of people would actually value that opportunity to follow up on their point or get clarification and so on. So I fear from the public perspective, it will be seen as an anti-democratic move in a way, although it's not intended as such. So I'm kind of concerned about how this is communicated when someone can't ask that follow-up. And I wonder if there's more that we can do to in the process of checking initially, because some of the most disruptive follow-up questions I've seen across councils are politically motivated. So people who are obviously, candidates or obviously like part of a specific pressure group that asks very similar questions across councils. So I wonder if some of those situations could be prevented by, I'm not sure how exactly to deal with it in terms of the rules, but it's quite obvious when someone is there to cause trouble, so shall we put it like this, rather than asking a genuine follow-up question.
Okay, thank you. And we've spent quite a bit of time on this first item, rightly so. It's very important. So what I propose we do now is we go to point 2, which is additional clarity on the rescheduling of meetings. And then when we've done all these, we'll then come back and take a vote. So number 2, please, Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. This won't come as a surprise to members because you discussed it at your last meeting and you raised some concerns about how the provision would be used. So the working group took those concerns away and hopefully have revised the relevant sections of the Constitution to address your concerns. I think there, to reassure members, the rescheduling of meetings is not a common occurrence. We set the meetings card every year in consultation with group leaders who share it with their groups. We appreciate that many of you have working commitments and obviously are required to book dates off work to attend committee meetings. So it is it's always challenged by the monitoring officer why a meeting is rescheduled, and it would have to be for a very good reason for that to happen. But I just think it gives this change gives some flexibility, because sometimes for various reasons there is a need to reschedule a meeting in order for it to be more efficient and effective.
Thank you. Any comments from members at all or questions? I take it we are happy with part 2. Point 2, excellent. And now on to 3, which is additional chapter in the Constitution related to council-owned companies.
Chair, I think we've got the Pension Fund Committee first. I'll just take that one on the pension fund. In relation to this item, we're just clarifying, given some of the work the pension fund does in relation to the access pool, that there is a need for certain types of decision relating to pooling arrangements to be reserved to full council. They are of such significance that it's important that full council actually makes that decision. And that's the change proposed. I'm actually going to go straight on to council-owned companies because I think hopefully there's not too many major difficulties. This is a new section of the Constitution, and it's to clarify the council's management of council-owned companies to ensure that the council meets its best practice requirement. And the council has done much to improve in this area. We have a new shareholder subcommittee which is working very effectively, and it's important that this section is included in our Constitution.
Thank you. Any questions or comments at all on this part? Councillor Wells, John?
Has there been a check on the aspect of the, at the moment, owned companies as to whether they fit within the compliance of this? Okay, I'll add one then. Certainly with this land, they report quarterly, whereas now it's being asked to report monthly. I don't know if there are other items like that.
Sorry, Councillor, can you just point out the part of the report you're referring to? That might help.
Got to find it.
Section 12 is the reporting aspect.
Well done.
Page 44.
Yes, it is 12.1, monthly reporting. monthly performance reporting to Ofwat. I would think monthly management accounts also could be a bit tough.
I mean, in terms of that, this line do report on a much more regular basis than just to the shareholder committee. So we have a shareholder representative who they report to regularly. So we know this land's financial position month to month. We don't leave it just in terms of quarter. So there will be financial monitoring during that period. That won't be the shareholder committee meeting on a monthly basis.
So this requirement for any new companies wouldn't allow that type of arrangement.
No, if I may, Chair, so the shareholder committee meets. They set a timeline in terms of which companies they consider that they want to monitor more regularly. So at the shareholder committee, they have a reporting timetable for various types of committees. So there are various types of company. So there are some companies which are higher risk than others. For example, this land that will have a more regular reporting schedule to the shareholder committee. Outside of that, in terms of management, day-to-day management of the company, so you don't do that just with the shareholder committee. We will usually have a shareholder representative, as we do with Pathfinder and also with this land, that manages that day-to-day relationship with the company, and they will need to see more regular reports than, say, the shareholder committee seeing them every quarter. They will want to see those management accounts quarterly, so they will see the financial reporting of the company more regularly, particularly if it's higher risk. Because what you don't want to do if you're a finance officer is have a nasty surprise at the end of the quarter. You want to be able to see how the position is developing. So the company can report either into the shareholder representative, or as the shareholder committee, they will normally report in with a higher risk company more regularly, maybe quarterly, as we do with this land. But there will be different reporting avenues to each sort of person, or each individual who holds the role, if you see what I mean.
Yes, that's not what this says. It implies more of a formal report than that.
Yes,
Chair, I think it's the council that's confusing. It means to the council as an organisation, not to the council as to a meeting. So the requirement to report monthly is to the council as an organisation, whilst the requirement for members is to receive quarterly reports to the shareholder subcommittee. And I think that's the wording. I think if it was to the council as a meeting, it would say full council. So we're talking the council as an organisation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on that? Yeah, David, thank you.
Thank you. We're talking about council-owned companies here, I believe, and I think I seek some guidance from longer-standing councillors and officers on this subject. I mean, I'm starting from the point of why on earth does a council want to own a company? That's my starting point. Limited liability companies need to have a minimum number of directors possible to run the company. They need to be nimble. They need to be able to observe the market that they're in and make changes, sometimes fairly quickly, depending on the conditions. They need to be very focused, finely tuned, observing what's going on, be able to change what they're doing. Fundamentally, they need to make a profit, not immediately, not every quarter, but certainly, let's say, on a year-by-year basis. And I don't know why. I don't think a council is a very good institution for running and owning a company myself. I'm sure there must be a reason. Please enlighten me. Thank you.
I'm sure many members are asking the same questions on council-owned companies. So council-owned companies can be established for a number of different purposes. They can be, they are useful vehicles, sometimes useful special purpose vehicles to achieve certain outcomes that the council can't do on its own. Certainly, the council can't make a profit in the same way as a company can do. I think that it's the view of very many statutory officers now that you have to think very, very carefully before establishing a company, and that's what the regime is designed to do. The governance failures that we've seen nationally in relation to council-owned companies have been related to not a clear, focused business plan in terms of companies being established, poor governance, and then lack of an exit plan as well from a company structure. So what this is designed to do is if, and I don't think there are any plans to establish any companies at the moment, but if a future council, including a new council, wanted to establish a company, I hope that they would take this part of the constitution into their consideration. And certainly, I absolutely take the point that Councillor Bywater made earlier about why we're doing this work when we've got a new council coming up. But actually, if we can get some of this stuff right now, the inheritance we give to a new council will be robust, because we won't start from scratch when we're looking at the governance of any new council. We'll be looking at what we have in place now. So, Michelle and I won't be putting our feet up for the next couple of years, unfortunately, and Nick as well, not looking at the constitution, trying to make it the best that we can. And this is part of that. No plans to establish any new companies. There are question marks in terms of establishment of companies. And I think councils need to think very seriously. And that would be my advice. If I was the monitoring officer, at a time a new company was being established, in terms of getting that initial setup right. So what we're trying to do at the moment is we're not planning to set up any new companies. We're trying to manage what we have effectively and clearly. And if at a point in the future that anyone thinks that's a really great idea, that we've got some governance around it, which we didn't have in the past and might have helped us in the past and would help any new organisation moving forward. It's not something that every council has, but certainly when you look at lessons learned from governance failures, it's something that those who have suffered with it tend to adopt to stop problems happening again in the future. And I think this is a really, positive step forward, for the county, because I think it shows that we're thinking about it. This is what we need to consider if we're doing things like that again. And it safeguards, the process moving forward and gives us the best possible chance. If us or a new council want to set up a company, then there's a checklist, there's some constraints around it. And I think it will help us in the future, any future council as well.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, we'll move on. That's all right. Excellent. Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. So the next issue relates to key decision thresholds for property transactions. At the moment, our current key decision threshold is 500,000. And obviously members will appreciate that the value of properties within the Cambridgeshire area means that we are catching a larger number of smaller asset sales within that. So it is being recommended that this level be increased to 750,000 and above for asset disposals only. Now, the point that I do need to emphasise, as with any decision below the key decision threshold, if officers do this obviously in consultation with spokes and chairs and vice chairs, feel that an item is politically sensitive, or there is other issues surrounding it that could cause some concern for members, then there is always the opportunity to take that item to committee. That's not ruled out. But when you've got some sales which aren't politically sensitive, there is a considerable delay if you have to wait to keep taking them to committee. So the proposal there is just for asset disposal only to increase the key decision threshold to 750,000.
Thank you. Any questions at all? This seems pretty sensible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And the last item, again, I think members will be familiar with because this was discussed at your last meeting and you did have some concerns in particular, that you felt there was a need to have some clarity about who could approve or accept alternative saving or income proposals in relation to the changes to the scheme of financial management. The whole reason this is being done is to strengthen the financial responsibility and control environment. But the Section 151 officer is very aware of the concerns that members expressed and has reviewed the section in section that's set out in Appendix 5, and hopefully has gone some way to alleviate your concerns, I think, by including consultation with the relevant chair in the proposals.
Yeah, I think that was a very good response. Anybody else? Comments or questions? No. Okay, thank you. So I think that was the final one, wasn't it? So I think we're generally agreed on all this except for the public questions procedures. Is that correct? I think I've judged the room. My view is I think this does need to go to council, and it will if we're happy to recommend it go there. So this is not the final decision. So it is our view that we'd like that to go. Michelle, sorry.
Sorry, I think just to help members, we, as members know, we write a specific report to full council, setting out what's been proposed from Constitution and Ethics. And in that report, and I'm looking at Nick, we will make reference to the issues that members here have raised regarding the supplementary question. So I don't want members to be under the impression that because you recommend that to go through to council, the impression in the report will be given that it was, overwhelmingly supported and everyone agreed with it. We will actually have a more nuanced section in the report to outline the concerns some members have expressed regarding the supplementary question.
Simon?
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, I'm comfortable with this. I mean, the recommendations are 1 to 6, aren't they? I think I'm happy for 2 to 6. But it's just one that I just want clarity on, that I'm not happy to support the supplementary question being struck out. So absolutely, as long as that comes across and we vote for that in that way, then I'm happy.
I think if we say we would like this to be considered by council, but Michelle will reflect concerns like that in the report, so members can see when they come to council, actually we weren't entirely agreed as a committee, and people rightly had some worries. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at Nick. I think we can reflect that concern, and we can make it clear. I think that I think the majority on the committee, I think I'm just looking, as I said, but a good number of members had some concerns about the supplementary question, and we will reflect that in the report, which will give members the opportunity to link that to the debate at full council accordingly.
Yeah, but anybody looking back at the minutes of this meeting or looking at this meeting, we're being asked recommendations 1 to 6. What are we doing here? Are we voting on these, or it seems a bit woolly? Are we? Can we be clear on this, really?
I do think Councillor Bywater's made a fair point. If you don't agree with that recommendation, then that's fair enough. The point that I would make, that you may need to reconsider, if you wish to keep the supplementary, what do you wish to do about the other elements? Because you're increasing the time people have for questions, you're increasing the number of questions, which will take up a considerable time of your council meeting, particularly if you have a very busy agenda. So I think there was a balance struck by removing the supplementary that gave more space available in order to increase the number of questions and increase the time for questions. If you want to remove the supplementary, then you might need to reconsider the package, so to speak.
Is that something we can consider at council when the debate comes up, and we can have that clearer sort of view on what we're looking to amend it with? Alex?
Yeah, I agree. I think it has to be voted on as a package, because otherwise you have to split one, because, for example, I agree with the petition scheme and the other changes, but then you need to debate the package around the supplementary and the time allowed and so on, and it will take writing another recommendation to be able to do that. So yeah, whilst I'm happy to support this as a package to go to full council, I think it would be worth noting as well that some of the concerns raised were like people from different political parties as well. So we don't give the impression that only one group or only opposition and so on were raising concerns about this as well. So it would be good because we heard cross-party voices today raising concerns about this.
So in terms of proceeding that now, I think we need to put this to a vote, don't we? And members need to, yeah, go on.
In relation to the concerns expressed, I mean, there is provision for individual members to ask in the minutes that they wish it to be recorded that they didn't support the removal of the supplementary, and that may address your
Let's do that then.
comment.
I'm
Yeah.
conscious of time and I don't want to drag this out. Let's just make that clear and then I'm happy to move on, Chair.
I think we need to record who disagreed. Yeah. The recorded vote. The recorded vote.
So, sorry, Chair. If the proposal is to vote through all the recommendations, in other words, that it goes to council for debate, but to make it clear in the minutes that councillors Bywater, councillors Bulat, and I don't know if there is any councillors did not support the removal of the supplementary question, but wished for it to be debated at full council, we can be that specific in the minutes. But members need to indicate if they wish to be named in the minutes. And then the recommendations themselves can just be voted on or through, if that's the wish.
Thank you.
Do you want to?
I think somebody wants to speak. You want to speak before we take a vote?
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. I'm struggling a little bit with the wording of the report, which is saying that we will recommend the following changes to the Constitution as set out to full council. I'm not sure that I feel comfortable recommending to full council to adopt the change for part 1, public question procedures. I'm very comfortable in recommending that council considers it, but to me, the wording as laid out in the report suggests that we are recommending the following changes. Is that a fair reading?
I think the aim is for full council to debate this, which I think is good. The concern you have is that by recommending the inferences that you agree with it. So I think what would be best is, as suggested, if you recommend that council consider the first one, amendments to public question procedures and the council's petition scheme, and then with the other recommendations, you can recommend them if that is amenable to people. So then it differentiates the.
Would you just break it down for clarity?
Yeah.
Really.
Message to council with this is we weren't agreed entirely on the first bit on the supplementary questions. The other ones we are agreed on, yeah, for council to debate, and then they can do that in the knowledge that we had this very good debate here and people had different views. So we content to progress on that basis. Everybody seems happy. Okay. Yeah. Anybody wish? Right. Thank you very much. That was quite interesting. That's what constitutional points. Who knew they could be so interesting? But so we move on to item 4, equally interesting item, which is the monitoring officer report. Emma.
Constitution and Ethics is the most interesting committee at the council. You must know that. So this is the annual report that I provide to the committee as the monitoring officer. I have a statutory role under the Local Government and Housing Act 1989 for various elements of the Constitution, and also to report illegality and maladministration to the council. So the report just summarises the work which I and my teams, particularly Democratic Services, lead over the course of the year. As you members will know, it's been a pretty busy year for us with elections, trying to get the Constitution updated and reordered and made more easily readable. So Democratic Services have been very busy this year. The reason why this report comes forward is because the elements that I control of the governance framework are a really important part of how the council makes decisions. It helps the council make good decisions in the right way. That's really, really important for public trust and confidence. So that's why we're always tinkering with the Constitution, trying to get it. It's like having an elderly car, you're always tinkering with bits and pieces, trying to get it right, trying to apply the principles and the articles that are enshrined in the Constitution that relate to public rights and access to information and transparency and robust decision making. So everything we do is governed by that. And the work that we've really undertaken in relation to all of that is contained within the meeting. That is supported in a huge part by the Constitution and Ethics Committee and the working group, which I think is an excellent way of really getting to grips with some of these difficult issues that members absolutely will have a view on. And it's really important that they drive that process with advice from us as well. So we try and put forward a view, an officer view in terms of the operation of it, and members will have absolutely important knowledge that we don't have as officers into how the public engage with this and how they debate with each other. So that is enormously important, and I think the Constitution and Ethics Working Group has worked really hard and really well on some very thorny issues this year, not least motions, petitions, questions, all the other difficult things we ask you to do. The Constitution is a really, really important document. It's our rule book. Everyone should know about what's in it. It's the way in which, as a member, you can get work done. It really is so important. And then moving on from that, ensuring the lawfulness of decision making. The other statutory officers, the Section 151 officer and the head of paid services, the chief executive, meet regularly to discuss issues of specifically governance issues relating to the whole council. So particularly we have a regular meeting to discuss more general issues in terms of governance culture particularly, and then we have more specific meetings to talk about particular issues that are causing us some issues. So this year we've met specifically around the guided busway where the council was prosecuted, and I mentioned that in my report, and also this land, which remains a governance concern to us, and that we keep a close eye on. All decisions are now tracked through the corporate clearance group, so we know what is coming on the agendas when it's coming on the agendas, and those are put through a full EQIA and also assessment in terms of legal and financial and procurement implications as they move through the process. So we know what decisions the council is making, what are the implications they're likely to have. We do try, there's a constant plea from many of us to get reports as short as possible for members without leaving out the detail. I had a 400-page CLT agenda to read this week, so I'm feeling your pain. We do need to try and get that better for members, but we introduced a new template last year through Democratic Services, did a lot of training on that, and that is working well. We've also embedded officer delegated decisions. So where, for example, a committee gives a delegated authority to a director to implement something, we now have those published and recorded much more comprehensively than we have ever done. And Michelle's team track those and track down the culprits who aren't publishing the notices very ably. So again, thanks to Democratic Services for that. We frequently get asked for advice from officers and members, really healthy. Again, we like to encourage that. We don't want anyone to think that they're asking a stupid question. They're not. And sometimes members will come to me and say, actually, I'm not sure this bit is quite right. We have a culprit on this committee particularly, Councillor Dupre. So I'm not sure this bit is quite right. What is your view on that point? And that is enormously helpful as well, because actually it's when those the governance structures become stressed, you want to see them working well, so that is very useful. And we will have those discussions amongst the professional group of officers in terms of what works well, what is the right thing to do according to the principles in the Constitution. So that has been enormously helpful as well. We also make sure that CLT and ELT are trained on all of those. I've already mentioned the work of the Constitution and Ethics Committee, which has met regularly, and we did have the hearing subcommittee meeting last year as well, in terms of standards and conduct. And that brings me sort of onto the latter bit of the report, really, in terms of member conduct, which is genuinely very good at Cambridgeshire. We have high standards of conduct. This is a good place to work if you're an officer, in terms of the relationships with members. They are constructive generally. Not to say we don't always agree on things, but we actually can find a way through that. And I think that all the officers really do value that. And I don't think we say that enough, because it's very difficult as an officer to work in an environment where you don't have a positive but constructive and challenging relationship with members. It's much better, more productive environment if you can get that relationship between members and officers right. So we do try and make sure we hang on to that as well. And through the officer corps, and particularly the chief executive, he's very strong on that, and that is very helpful to me as the monitoring officer. We've issued agendas, all our agendas on time for the last municipal year. We try and make sure that is absolutely done properly, because if we don't issue the agendas on time, then the decision is challengeable potentially. And as I said, those decisions by officers are published on the website. We also make sure that, you know, the bodies that take the decisions are empowered to take them. So, for example, assets and procurement couldn't take a decision that's delegated to children and young people, for example. I'm also the responsible officer for access to information, and have a role in freedom of information in terms of qualified opinions. So where the council wishes to withhold information, I give a qualified person's opinion in terms of whether that test is met. And I've given 2 qualified persons' opinions this year. I think that's probably everything apart from the Ombudsman reports. Under Section 5A of the Local Government and Housing Act, I have to report to you any findings of maladministration that have happened to the council in the last year. You will see from Appendix 1, those are there for your information. They primarily relate to SEND within the council. We know this is an issue nationally. The Children and Young People Committee do receive much more detailed reports on this. I think due to receive their next report very shortly next week, to look into that, because that is an issue more nationally, but I have to report them to you. So for this year, you know, I'm happy to confirm that I think our systems are adequate in terms of governance control. There's not much that gets past Michelle and her team, which is brilliant. We continue to regularly update the Constitution. We look for gaps in it. We look for weaknesses in it. We've strengthened compliance a lot this year, particularly in terms of reporting, report writing, oversight of that. So I'm personally, as the monitoring officer, I'm very pleased with that. We have a good, strong statutory officer group, because you want your statutory officers who actually speak to each other quite regularly. It's a symptom of a dysfunctional council unless they actually can get on and solve problems together. And the code of conduct with our member behaviour, as I said to you, it's operating as effectively as it can do, with all the caveats around that. But, you know, we don't have an issue with poor member behaviour here. Really, there are 1 or 2 isolated incidents, and that is to do with the culture that members set for themselves. I don't have to wave a big stick at people. Certainly, I'm hope to guide people where I think they might have gone a little awry, but actually members here are genuinely respectful to each other. So I think that's really, really helpful. So my key issues as a monitoring officer for the council in terms of moving forward for next year, The guided busway will continue to be an area of focus. We've been prosecuted, we've been subject to a large fine. So obviously the statutory officers are very concerned that we get that position remedied and right. It's really, really hugely important issue. So that is meeting, we met weekly last year and we're meeting twice weekly this year to keep an eye on what is going on in that area. This land is another hugely important governance issue for the council. It is very important where we have a high risk company, and for us, that is a high risk because there's so much investment in it, that we keep hold of that. The last year's work, there's been substantial improvements with that. I am absolutely delighted with the shareholder subcommittee and their performance, the rigor that they've adopted in relation to the examination of this. These are not easy issues. They are not uncomplex issues. So I'm very pleased to see the shareholder subcommittee not just up and running, but up and running and doing, in my view, a really good job. It's some of the best work I've seen members do, and it really is exceptional. So on that side, we've tried to strengthen the governance around this land, particularly so that members have a good oversight of that. We've also asked them to strengthen their own governance, and we've reported that through our annual governance statement as well. That again, we were meeting weekly with this land. We've now taken it down to every 2 weeks to alternate with the guided busway, but that again will remain a continual point of contact for the statutory officers and those officers who are responsible for the operational management of that. Again, LGR is going to be a key feature for us this year. We've already got a work stream ongoing in terms of governance, which is led by Michelle Sachs, the Chief Executive Huntingdonshire. So that is really useful, and that will set us up well for the decisions that we need to make as a council moving into LGR. Just one thing I wanted to link back to is all of this work is set out in much more detail in the annual governance statement and action plan, and that forms the basis of a lot of my work for this year. So yes, happy to reassure members that we've got an adequate governance system in place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Emma. Any questions or comments? That was a very thorough update. So you had a 400-page report for senior officers, and that sounds like some of the planning reports we get, but really, I'm sure. Lorna.
Yeah, just to thank Emma for her report, and I think it shows really the huge strides that this council has made in improving its governance in all kinds of ways in recent years. And considering the legacy that we were left, we had moved on hugely at officer level and I think at member level. The establishment of the shareholder subcommittee has been an excellent move and is really repaying things. We are very much more on top of some very risky enterprises and risky decisions from previous years, and I'm very pleased to see that happening. I'm very pleased to see the behaviour in the council is generally so much better than it has been on some occasions in the past, and also better than I've seen on some councils I could name but won't. And I really want to say, a huge well done to all involved in really moving this council forwards in the way it needs to move. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else before we move on? No. So Emma again, item 5, review of complaints received under the members' code of conduct.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is just the general update in terms of the complaints received from 10th of June to date. As members will see, there aren't a vast amount coming in. We did have a large number for the last meeting that related to one topic, but we're not seeing vast amounts in terms of the trajectory coming in, and nothing which is symptomatic of anything which is wider across the council. So thank you, Chair.
Anybody wish to comment or have questions on that item? No. So our final item is 6, the agenda plan. Do any members or officers have any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Just to alert members that we are working with the Constitution Working Group on proposed changes to motions, and we will be sharing that with the working group to bring to your next meeting in November. And we will also be bringing forward information to include in the Constitution in relating to the planning protocol and questions and representations at Planning Committee.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the agenda. That concludes our meeting. Our next meeting will be held on the 11th of November. So appreciate your attendance and thank you. Take care.